Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast Channels 6 and 22. Channel 6 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 8, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well. Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast Channels 6 and 22. Channel 6 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 8, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.
Thank you all for coming. I want to welcome you to this presentation of the Pine and Elliot Street Historic Area Assessment presentation. So this is a presentation on a study that we've done of your neighborhood. And for those of you who know or who do not know, we are the Heritage Commission. I am Françoise Elise, or Fran. I'm the chair. Julie Gilman is on our commission. She is a select board representative. And Pam Jetting is on our commission also. So in terms of the Heritage Commission, are any of you familiar with it? So basically, it's like another commission in the town of Exeter. We're a citizen commission, and we're advisory. And the purpose of the commission is to offer the town help in managing, recognizing, and protecting historical and cultural resources town-wide, which is different from a historic district, which is just a certain geographic area. And basically, a heritage commission does what a conservation commission does for natural resources. Basically, we advise and assist local boards on issues, conduct inventories, we educate the public, we provide information, and we advocate for the historic nature of the town. So as part of our work, we document and catalog historic assets within the community. So this study is basically part of the work that we do in terms of documenting and surveying historic resources of the community. And other work that we've done, you can go to exeternewhampshire.gov/HC, and you'll see some other studies that we've done. We've done the Park Street area survey, the town-wide mapping project, which basically is an overall guide for what we do want to.
It's for how the town developed. It starts in the center where most towns start, and then you see the development as it goes through time, progressing outer and outer. That was.
Could you both use your mic?
Yeah, well.
Thank you, okay, all right,
They don't
okay.
project
I'm
very well
a soft
in
voice.
the room. They're really for the recording, so.
Okay.
But I'll try. No, they do work.
Okay. So we also have the Franklin Street Area Survey and the Winter Street Cemetery Inventory. So if you go to the town website, you can see all the studies, including this one, and you can open it up and read it, and, you know, you could print out pages from the study from which you might want to do so.
And if you're low-tech people like me, you could go to the Historical Society and get the paper copy.
In the library?
I think.
Okay, the Historical Society.
Yeah, just leave it there. It's
I'm
easy.
not going to pledge to the library, I'm not sure.
Okay, okay.
Say the website again.
Okay, so it is.
Just go to the Exeter,
Town of Exeter website.
Yeah.
And then it says departments, and go to Heritage.
Okay.
Heritage Commission.
and then all the links come up there.
It's different
Yeah.
from the Historical Society.
Definitely, yep. So the Heritage Commission contracted with the Preservation Company to perform this study. And the study was funded by a certified local government grant from the New Hampshire Division of Historical Resources. And to go further with your question about why we do this, the New Hampshire Division of Historical Resources encourages towns to collect, organize, and make available survey information on New Hampshire historic assets, including farmsteads, town halls, churches, village centers, and residential neighborhoods. So this study includes the region of Olive Pine Street, Elliot Street, Grove Street, Alewife Court, Hilliard Circle, parts of Marston Court, Court Street, and Chadwick Lane. This study has 3 sections. The first section, which I'm going to deliver, is going over general historic evolution of the area, the families that settled in the area, businesses, schools, professions of the residents in the area, what affected the neighborhood development, carpenters, the builders, and characteristics of the neighborhood in general. There's a second portion, which Julie will deliver, is an architectural description of the style of the homes in the area. And then there's a third section, which I feel this neighborhood is very lucky to have. There's a specific history and description of the architecture of each home with pictures. Several of the homes have pictures earlier days, but there's a picture of each home in the study. So going forward with the study, where do we get our data and facts for the survey? The data in this study and the owners of the properties are obtained by a combination of sources: tax assessor database, the Rockingham County Deeds, Ancestry.com, and very importantly, the Exeter Historical Society, where they have a trove of old Exeter newspapers, old maps, population census data, city directories, and they also have a lot of what's called vertical files on families, specific individuals, and specific properties. So going forward with the study, this is a map of how the neighborhood is built out today. So we are going to go through some old maps in this presentation. So if you keep this map in front of you, you could probably refer to it pretty easy. I mean, it will help you understand the future maps that we're going to be looking at. So this is a map 802. And this shows this is the area that we're looking at. This area was undeveloped at the time, and if you notice that Linden Street, Front Street are the only streets that are in existence at the time, and Water Street. So geographically, this is a southwest quadrant of downtown Exeter. The landscape is flat. Before it was developed, it was agricultural land. And some of you may know this, but maybe the new people don't, which I'm so excited to have you know. This neighborhood once hosted 2 schools, a hospital, prize-winning floral greenhouses, and it did host a circus occasionally. So historical background. This is before 1846. Phillips Exeter Academy, right there, established its first building on Front Street in 1783, this had a profound influence. It's going to have a profound influence on the development of the town, and also, as you can see, it will have a profound influence on the development of the neighborhood. Elliot Street. This Elliot Street originated as a farm lane. It was known as Whitefield's Lane. During the early 1800s, Joseph Whitfield rented and lived there. So that's the lane, and that's his house.
And he was a black guy. And a poet.
Weren't we trying to get his name back on the street at one point?
They were. But it's been Elliot Street ever since the Elliots built it, so.
So Joseph Whitfield was among about 80 African Americans living in Exeter at the time. Joseph Whitfield was born enslaved in Virginia about 1762. He escaped to Newburyport, Mass., where he met Nancy Paul, an educated young woman from Exeter. She was the daughter of Caesar Paul, a former free slave of John Gilman. They married in 1797, and Joseph he did chores around town. Of note, one of their sons, James Whitfield, became a well-known abolitionist poet, and Caesar's daughter, Rhonda, stayed in Exeter and married the Revolutionary soldier Jude Hall. So you could see Whitfield Lane before it became Elliot Street. Okay. So this is the neighborhood that we're still looking at, still undeveloped. Moody Elliot acquired the 65 acres of land in 1930s. 1830s, or thank you. Okay, 1830, which is the subject of this neighborhood survey. Moody Elliott lived in a large federal-style home on 66 Front Street, which we'll see in the next, nope, we'll see it right here.
It's coming up, but
Well, it's right here. That's where Moody Elliott lived. So he bought the house there, the land there. Moody moved to Exeter from Newburyport. His father was a ship captain there. Moody had a wife and 3 children. It is documented that he was an industrious farmer.
that's what it said in his obituary. It said he was a hardworking, industrious farmer.
And he also bought property in the area. Moody passed away in 1847. He's buried and has a gravestone in the Exeter Cemetery. Upon his death, he passed the land on to his daughter, Miranda Elliot, and she was responsible for the initial development of the area. So in the back of the room on the table, I do have a large map, and it does, so you could see much more clearly where Moody Elliott lived, and in back of his house, you can see the whole area there that is undeveloped. In 1846, Miranda Elliott hired John Scammon, a farmer, judge, and land surveyor from Stratham, to subdivide her land into house lots. There were 7 lots on the western side, 7 lots on the western side of Elliott Street, and 8 lots along the northern side of Court Street. Miranda Elliott sold a number of the lots to Retire Parker. So this is where Miranda Elliott lives, and right next to her is Retire Parker, who was her next-door neighbor on Front Street. The first houses were built on Elliott Street at the end of the 1840s. Some of the first houses were spec houses. So these were houses that the developers built to sell and to rent. And it's quite interesting to see, to read some of the advertisements for the houses in the newspaper at that time. In 1848, a new house on Elliott Street was advertised in the newspaper with a well, a water piped into the house, a barn suitable for a horse and a cow, and gardens. In 1856, the house of C.W. Hervey was available, featuring a piazza, a small barn, and fruit trees.
And having water piped into your house in the 1840s was a big deal. This is a great house. And think about having to go out to the well every morning.
Hey, Pam? Pam?
Yeah.
Can you bend that microphone over, because, yeah.
Where was it piped from?
That's good.
Is that coming?
The well?
Oh, the well, They probably had like a hand pump.
Well, actually,
No.
Exeter did have water.
We had the waterworks, and occasionally we still find the wooden pipes from the original system.
And if you come again to the Historical Society, we have some of those wooden pipes. So you could see what, and those wooden pipes went in just like 1802. So Exeter was an advanced town.
Wow. Pine Street was laid out in 1846 from Front Street to Court Street. Lawyer and Judge Henry French bought 15 acres of land from the Elliot family at 45 Pine Street. A house was built on the property in 1850. Judge Henry French developed this property into a model farm. A model farm. A model farm is a farm that plants ecologically balanced plants to support a thriving cash crop. Of note, Henry French was the father of sculptor Daniel Chester French.
Who sculpted the memorial at the corner?
Yes, he did.
He did.
In fact, we're going down there Memorial Day on Monday. That's where they have the ceremonies. And that is something that Daniel Chester French gave to his hometown
Before or after the Lincoln Memorial?
after.
And it was famous.
He also did work on the bandstand downtown.
Yes, he did.
He worked with an architect named Gilman. Surprise.
The upper end of Pine Street was divided out of the property, the Tilted property, which is right over here. A new schoolhouse on Grove Street, 10 Grove Street, was built in 1852. So, okay. So the Tilton property is up here. And the school is right here. It's called the Grove Street School, and it was built in 1852. It was one of 4 schools in District 1 and served 60 pupils. The first teacher was Charlotte Ellis, who taught in Exeter for 33 years until her death. The Grove Street School housed grades 4 to 6 until 1912, when they relocated the students to a former high school on Court Street. The school building was moved to the high school grounds to be used as a manual training shop. A house on 8 Grove Street was built in its place.
Now, notice that this poor teacher, how many students did she have?
60.
60. So when the modern teachers say, oh, we can't do more than 20, just think about what they used to do.
She could also hit them.
Yes, she did.
Just yes. It's a different standard.
For those at home who didn't hear it, the teacher could use some physical restraints
Yes.
with children that we can no longer use.
And she had a woodshed.
Oh, God. So, who built the houses in the neighborhood? A number of carpenters lived in the area and are assumed to have built the houses they lived in. John Brown and Sebastian Brown Warren. Let's see. Okay. Right here. This is where they lived, right there. They lived at 35 Pine Street, and they were builders of a number of other homes in the neighborhood. Of note, they built several prominent structures in Exeter, including the Town Hall, the Episcopal Church, the Baptist Church, Public Library, Courthouse, and the Gymnasium at Exeter Academy. Other carpenters are identified in the census and local history, and they were Dearborn Blake, and he lived right there. and Nathaniel Jewell, and he lived right here. So what did the people do for work that lived in the area? Census indicates that at the time, the residents of this part of town were carriage manufacturers, lawyers, merchants, sea captains, druggists, ministers, printers, blacksmiths, masons, and machinists. Young men worked as clerks, and daughters did jobs like milliner or public school teacher. The area residents were business partners. A number had family connections between households. Some households were headed by women, usually widows with older children, or daughters who remained in the family home and didn't marry. Male academy teachers, Phillips Exeter Academy teachers, boarded with families in the area. Most students at the academy continued to board in private homes in the area, in the neighborhood. The Episcopal Church was first located on the east side of Elliot Street. Let's see.
Down a little.
That one?
I can't,
Right there.
there you go.
Episcopal Church that was the original Episcopal Church. Going forward, the Episcopal Church acquired a house on 43 Pine Street.
I wonder if it became the theater, the old PA theater.
Oh,
Well, the church was raised.
Yeah.
yes, we'll get to that. But, so this is a site of the new Episcopal Church, and this is the home, is this your home? That was moved to the back?
Yeah.
Yes, so this home, the property was purchased, and this home, which is your home, was moved to the back property, and it has an address on
Nelson Drive.
in Nelson Drive, yeah. The old Episcopal Church, was purchased by the school and dismantled. In 1865, Miranda Elliot sold her 3 remaining parcels of land to Edmund Elliot and William Moulton. George Shute bought 1.5 acres from Elliot and Moulton at 3 Pine Street. So this would be 3 Pine Street. So this is where George Shute lived. Of note, he was also an author and published stories about his Exeter boyhood.
I think you mean Henry Shute. George was his father.
Really?
Yeah,
The writer was Henry.
yeah,
Thank you.
Real diary of a real boy.
right.
Okay, so George Shute's son, of note. Okay. Was an author and published books, The Real Diary of a Real Boy, and he went on to write a total of 20 books, including Bright and Fear, and his stories were published extensively in the Saturday Evening Post.
And which house was theirs? The
This is
second?
number 3.
3,
Right,
So the first
George.
one.
and he was a local lawyer and a judge. And his brother Richard was a police chief, so they got quite around in town. And Henry lived right up through the 1940s.
So this is Alewife Court, and it was laid out earlier as Grove Place or Grove Court. And the first 2 houses were built on that road in 1870. Going forward to the Victorian era, 48 Pine Street was the location of the Exeter Cottage Hospital. That's it right here. When it was first established, 28. When it was first established in a rented house in 1897. The flat land in the neighborhood allowed space for large greenhouses that supplied the demand in town and regionally for flowers and plants. All of the structures were leased, and then George W. Hilliard purchased them. He lived at 11 Grove Street. So this is 11 Groves. He lived there. Hilliard relocated the greenhouse business to where Hilliard Circle is now, which is here. He became known for prize-winning roses. Marston Street was laid out by Edward Gilman in 1890. And as time progressed, the residents expanded their work titles to include hardware dealer, grocer, banker, carpenter, dentist, printer, as well as cotton mill superintendent, postmaster, real estate, and insurance agencies. Phillips Exeter Academy teachers continued to board with families in the neighborhood. Going forward to the early 20th century, Phillips Exeter Academy continued to expand with a new gymnasium built in 1819. The school had over 570 students and 33 faculty. There was about 10 houses in the neighborhood offering rooms to students at this time, and at least 6 professors and instructors lived in the neighborhood. An academy principal bought a new house on Pine Street, 27 Pine Street. I believe it's that one. Yep, that one.
Where is that? Whenabouts was that?
1941.
Was that Saltonstall?
Excuse me?
Was that Saltonstall buying the house? Did
I
it
don't
say?
know.
What number is that?
The principal that built a new house on 27 Pine Street.
Ah, we'll get to that later, but the building she's talking about was torn down and replaced by what's there now.
Aside from the greenhouses, there were no other businesses in the area until a funeral home was established at 14 Pine Street. The Exeter Day School, a private elementary school, opened in a rented space on Pine Street in 1936. I don't know the location of that, though. The Hilliard greenhouses were destroyed in a hurricane in 1938, and Hilliard Circle was then subdivided and developed by Maud Hilliard. The lots were sold and houses were built over several years. 31 Elliot Street was owned by Phillips Exeter Academy and became a principal's residence. I don't know which principal, though.
35?
31.
31?
Now, if you do go online, this whole study's there, so you can check everything.
I used to cut through Saltonstall's yard.
Oh. So from 1975 to present, The Breedwit Funeral Home is still the only commercial property in the area. There has been no subdivision or change in density since then. It continues to be one of Exeter's most upscale neighborhoods, and most homes are single families. Only a few homes have been converted into multiple family dwellings. Phillips Exeter Academy began actively acquiring houses in the neighborhood in the early 2000s, and Phillips Exeter Academy owned faculty residences, including 15, 27, 31 Elliot Street, 5, 7, and 15 Grove Street, 13 Alewife Court, and 4 and 7 Hilliard Circle, 76 and 80 Court Street, and 2 Marston Street. So that concludes the first portion of the study. And the second portion would be the architectural description and style of the homes in the area. If anybody wants to look at these maps. So, do you want me to?
Come on
Yeah,
over and
okay.
pull up a chair.
Okay. Pull up a chair.
Yeah, just pull up a chair. Okay, I'm going to start in this study. Each property is described, and it describes the architectural style and the materials that it's made of, and also different times or dates that things are added, like a porch or a garage or window trim. Sometimes they're different. So I'm going to skip over a little bit of that because it's very dry, and it's in the report, so it comes before the history of who owned what and where. So these are pictures of 3 Grove Street. No, sorry, I had my thing backwards. 3 Pine Street, which you'll see later is looks almost exactly the same. It's done a really nice job of maintenance and preservation. And I think Fran actually talked about this. This was owned by the Burleys, a stationary dealer in Chicago and then Boston. And you'll find a lot of the properties, especially on Pine Street, where people moved across the street or moved on to Grove Court. It's really funny when you read about it that this fellow moved from 28 Pine Street to 27 Pine Street, or something across the street. So it's well, you'll hear a lot about it, but Burley became the horticulturist and erected those greenhouses, and he sold roses, cut flowers, and garden and house plants, fruit trees, and shrubs. It later became more just flowers. And then, from 1890, he moved to Grove Street. This was shoot from the Henry Shute Real Diary of a Real Boy. And you said everything about that. That's why, yeah, I think that's it. So let's go to this one, 27 Pine Street no longer exists. We'll see the house that's built there in its place. And that was with Cottage Hospital, 28 Pine Street. And it's also interesting to see how much of the streets have been preserved. People there really appreciate their history. Okay. What's the next slide? Yeah, you'll see.
Henry A. Shute.
Yeah, 3 Pine Street. 3 Pine Street, so before and after. Very similar. Okay, who's next? Okay. 35 Pine Street. I'll talk more about them as we go through, but you can see the historical photos of them, and they're available.
No, 35.
Yeah, 35 and 43. And that's one that was moved to Court Street. We like to move things around.
But if, I think that's my house, so when was it moved to Court Street?
It looks like your house.
Or maybe the land
is
went
my
all
house.
the way out to Court Street
Maybe.
before they
Yeah.
had Nelson Drive.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah,
Yeah, because his
Yes,
was on
I bet,
50.
yeah.
right, it was closer to the road, yeah. Isn't that wonderful?
And then there's this nice view on Elliot Street, and you can see the lines of elm trees
Yeah.
that covered, and I was talking to Pam earlier, all the main streets in town were just lined with elms. And 1938, a hurricane came along and knocked out most of them,
Yes.
if not all of them. And then what was left had died from, the elm disease. And then the next one is a nice view that you will recognize. Let's see.
Did they talk anywhere about the width of the streets?
No,
Yes, they did, actually. We have a letter from a man who was buying one of Miranda Elliott's properties, and he said, "I'll buy it, but you have to make the street bigger." And she had to widen Elliott Street so that two carriages could.
Could go? I've always wondered why Pine Street but seemed to be much wider.
yeah, it is.
Like, it's like a market town.
Yes.
And yet, why?
Because Pine Street was frankly made for the elite. This was the high end of town. This was the lawyers, the professors.
So they needed more space.
Yeah, no, yeah, they do. They feel
They needed
they're-
parking.
They're
They
big.
end up with more traffic.
Yes.
They needed parking out front.
And of course, you have the funeral home.
Right.
Did you want to
That,
talk about
uh,
Amy's house?
No, I just was showing the historical pictures that we can go back to, but do you recognize this?
Oh, sorry.
You passed it too fast. There you go.
You recognize this little triangle at the end of Pine Street?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Still
my,
there.
I didn't, and that didn't tell you quick.
It's much smaller now. Okay, go to the next one. Okay, now we're getting into the
That's Florence's.
meat and, that's Florence's house. Everybody knows Florence's house. Now I've lost my page. Okay, this is where we're talking about, Charles Burley bought it, he's the stationery dealer, and he built the greenhouses. And his father and siblings then moved down to 22 Pine Street. And his daughter Natalie lived there until she had a lodger who was a teacher and a school librarian. Let's go to 5 Pine Street. It's here. Sorry, I had everything all marked out.
It's,
I went past it. Sorry, I got organized and then disorganized. Here we go. Oh, that's why. This is where Henry Shute lived, sorry. And he subdivided his lot for his son, Richard, who subsequently got married that year and built the house. And then we go on to 14 Pine, yeah. The Brewitt Funeral Home wasn't always a funeral home. Was built in the 1851-ish, should tell the other ones. And the funeral home was established in the 30s. But before that, was built by Joseph Robinson, who also built another house at 42 Pine Street. And John Chadwick, I'll never get the Chadwick street name, became the owner of the house, and then Daniel and Minnie Gilman were the owners from the 1890s. They owned a whole lot of property on the other side of Court Street. Then the Bruitts bought it in the 30s and expanded it to the undertaking business that he established elsewhere in Epping.
Forgive me, who's the builder
Who's what?
for 42? Who was the builder?
42.
For 14 and 42, the same.
Yeah, 14.
I'm taking notes from
It was Joseph Robinson. He was a carriage maker, and he bought the land and built the other house at 42, which we'll come to. Okay. 20 Pine Street is the Selleck House. Actually, yeah. The house is built on a lot subdivided from 14 Pine Street, and the owners were George and Amy Selleck, who previously lived on 28 Pine Street. So people like to stay where they grew up. 22 Pine Street, the Giddings Brick House.
22? Yep. Where you go?
These are not.
22?
I think it's
Yeah.
20.
Hmm?
No, it says 22.
Oh, you're right. No, 22 Pine Street. These are not, my descriptions are not necessarily in order of
I don't think,
pictures.
27, 22, but it's not a 22 here, yeah. 22 Pine Street is here. Yeah, okay. Giddings Workhouse, yeah.
Yeah, the Giddings Brick House.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's the first house, I was just looking at
And the fellow who,
front half is all brick, yeah.
yeah, the fellow who built it was a brick mason, so it's not surprised that it was built as brick. And he lived here with his family, and they had a male school teacher boarding with them, probably from the academy. And let's see. And this family had moved from Court Street. So his son lived across the street at 3 Pine Street, and where he grew up. 25 Pine Street. This was the home of Walter Glant and his wife Henriette, and their 6 children. He worked down in the Lowell Silk Mills and then the Newmarket Manufacturing Company, and the lot was divided from the Shute property in 1909. After Glant died, Mrs. Glant and her daughter, also Henriette, had several female lodgers who were teachers and 1 maid. Henriette Gallant lived there until the 1960s, so she was quite a long-lived person on the street. And now 27 Pine Street with the Saltonstall House. This house is,
That's the Sultan's house.
yeah. It was built for the PEA principal, William Saltonstall. It's an old town name. He was the principal from 1932 to 1963.
Central chimney. Police federal. Yeah.
William and Catherine Saltonstall and their 5 children lived here with a housemaid. And the 19th century houses previously on the site had been the home of the lumber dealer Luther G. Cate and the later PEA English professor James A. Tufts. Another name you will hear around Exeter. 28 Pine Street. This house predates we think it was built around 1869. I'm sorry, I haven't given the titles for all these houses. Built just around 1869. And the owner was William Stratton, who was a gas fitter and superintendent of the gas works, which are close by up on the corner of Water Street and Green Street. Okay, 32. I've done 28. This is, yeah, this is Brown,
This is their house, okay.
the Brown Cobb House, built around 1875. This house was owned by sisters Charlotte E. and Annie Brown, who were milliners with a shop on Water Street. They're younger sisters of John H. Brown and Sebastian Brown, who lived across the street. They moved from High Street. I guess they moved on up to the east side. No, the west side, sorry. Where did they go? During the early 20th century, this was the home of Arthur and Hazel Cobb. He was manager at the Exeter Brass Works near the railroad corridor, so everybody worked on the other side of Front Street. Let's see. And 33 Pine? Yep. 33 Pine Street was built by Sebastian Brown and Abby Brown. He worked as a wheel hub and spoke manufacturer and as carpenter. The house was inherited by John and Lillian Brown, who had an insurance agency. They had 3 children, and let's see, Lillian Brown ran the agency and was a bank treasurer. Margaret and Mary Brown were teachers at the high school and the seminary. And Mary Brown ran John Brown Agency in the 50s to 60s, 1950s to 60s. 34 Pine Street. The lot was sold by Elliot and Moulton to a lawyer and probate judge Joseph Wigan in 1868. Sorry, I didn't give you the name of the house. This is the Stearns Oakland House, built circa 1870. This is interesting because it was bought by the probate judge, but when left or sold the house to Miss Stearns, Hannah Stearns, and it was owned by women consecutively until the 1900s. Actually, 1940 was the last census, and that's unusual for the period to have a woman owning a building for that long. 35 Pine Street, the Brown and Warren House, circa, actually this one has an exact date, 1884, oh, no, it's the book and page number, sorry. It was built, it was moved in the late 1860s and remodeled in the Italianate style, so it was made to look fancier than it was originally. Brothers-in-law of Charles Warren and John Brown, who also lived on the street, they were carpenters and building contractors. They built a number of the prominent structures in Exeter, including the town hall, the then Episcopal Church, the Baptist Church, which used to be on Elm Street, and the public library, courthouse, and gymnasium at the Exeter Academy. Not the one that is there currently, but probably the Thompson Cage. Let's see. Charles Warren and Frances Warren occupied one half of the house, and John and Mary Brown and their children on the other. The 2 women shared the house as of 1900. And as usual, rooms were rented to PEA students. And in the 1930s, John and Florence Rowe were the owners, and he had a print shop downtown. The longtime tenant, Reginald Stevenson, ran the liquor store. You know where that was. 36 Pine Street, the Webster Julienne House. circa 1873. Elliot and Moulton sold that corner to the Carpenters, Brown and Warren, previously mentioned, and the property was purchased by Abby Webster. She was the wealthy property owner, or the widow of a wealthy property owner whose family owned a store in South Kingston. That's part of Exeter. And then moved. From the 1880s, this was the home of George Julian, postmaster, and his wife Charlotte and their adult children. And then sisters Maud and Catherine, who worked as dressmakers and stenographer, and the rooms were rented to PEA students. Maud, Julian, and her brother, a newspaper reporter, lived there into the mid-20th century. Uh, 38 Pine Street. We do 36.
The leader's house.
This was 38 Pine Street was the Janice Burbank house built around 1869. Janice was a house carpenter. He purchased the lot from Elliot and Moulton, the developers of the area. James and Lavinia Janice had 2 female teachers boarding with them. And the Exeter High School principal, he was later a longtime owner. And then his son Henry Burbank, who worked at the academy, and Arthur and Florence Dean lived there until the 1940s. Some of this is very dry. 42 Pine Street, the Robinson Siemens House, built circa 1855. Joseph Robinson was a carriage and wagon maker. A lot of those businesses were along Railroad Ave and down in the Franklin Street area, the carriage and wheelwright shops. And so it's interesting to know because they were just the shops and not houses, and now we know where everybody lived. And carriage and wheelwrighting were quite the prominent business at one point. Oh, we keep finding it. The family moved from 14 Pine Street. So, again, people liked each other and stayed in the neighborhood. Lydia Siemens owned this house in the late 19th century, and she was the widow of a merchant from Brookline, Mass. With 4 children. And her daughter lived there alone in the early 20th century, and Angus and Amy Mackenzie moved here from Grove Street in the 1920s. 43 Pine Street, Christchurch, 1965. I'm not going to say I remember it because I was very little, but it was a big deal at being such a striking difference to the surrounding area. It stands at the site of the French Gordon house that was moved around the corner onto Nelson Court.
That's
Yeah.
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 That's
Henry French built the large Italianate style house. He moved his family from the upper end of Court Street and established a large model farm. Well, and it was the childhood home of Daniel Chester French, who we all love and enjoy. And he had greenhouses that were later relocated to north of Grove Street. So even the greenhouses got moved. 45 Pine Street, the Souders house in 1937. The land was subdivided from 43 Pine Street in 1937. This was the home of Martin and Edna Souders and their children. Souders was a graduate of Kansas State University, and was the phys ed director at Milton Academy, which is kind of funny because he was in the PEA backyard. But then he did coach as athletic director from 1930 to 1962. And they didn't sell their house until 1964. Now we're going to turn the corner onto Elliot Street. We have 9 to 11 Elliot Street as a rental. The house was built between 1884 and 1892, one of the last homes to be built on the street. It was owned by William Belknap along with the former Elliot House on Front Street. Okay, that's really all the, let's go to 15 Elliot Street. This is the Tilton Silly House. Silly with a C, not an S. This is funny first name. Retire Parker Front Street purchased the lots from Miranda Elliot, one of the first owners of the area. And he soon sold it to William and Ann Tilton. William worked as a tin platter and stove dealer. After they died in the 1860s, this was the Silly House. Professor Bradbury Silly at PEA bought the house and was there for 40 years. This one was acquired by PEA in 2011. Oh, that's quite late. 19 Elliot Street in Quimby House, circa 1948, or 1848, sorry, I keep bringing it a century earlier. The lot was sold by Retire Parker, and there are buildings on the lot owned by Levi Andrews, a machinist. The house changed hands several times and apparently is now a rental. In 1859, it was purchased by David and Jemima Quimby, and it's the Quimby home for over 70 years. David Quimby was a watchmaker and jeweler, and his second wife, Bessie, lived there until the 1930s. 21 Elliot Street, the Hervey Kelly House, circa 1850. Charles Hervey was a merchant and purchased it from Miranda Elliot, again the developer of the area. He mortgaged the house. I don't know why that's even in there. In 1845, it was 2 stories with a piazza and a small barn, and it was advertised for sale. And John Kelly Esquire, former probate judge, bought the house for his family. This was the home of John P. Kelly and his wife Harriet Kelly for many years, and he was a graduate of PEA and owned a hardware store. The family had lived in... There's a lot of these that mention having live-in servants, and it's almost every property had a live-in servant, so I hadn't been mentioning those. Ms. Kelly lived here alone after her husband died in 1894 until George Baxter bought the house from her estate. And he worked for the electric railway, which used to run through town, and then the electric company, which was named right down on Water Street. 25 Elliot Street, Clark House, circa 1849. Eben Pittman, a shoemaker, bought this lot in 1849 and lived there in 1850, but soon moved elsewhere in town. I guess he didn't like his neighbors. And so lawyer John Wingate Clark and Benjamin Clark of Stratton were the owners in the 1850s, and John and Martha Clark lived there and then moved to Washington, D.C. Again, another place that had borders from PEA. 27 Elliot Street, the Jewel Smith House, circa 1848. Carpenter Nathaniel Jewell bought the lot from Miranda Elliot, and he was living there in 1850s with his wife and 2 daughters. In 1851, the Jewell family moved to 65 Court Street, and the house was sold to George Smith, the railroad station agent. It was the Smith family through the 1870s. And dry goods merchant John Pettingill was the next owner. And in the early 1900s, his widow, Mary Pettingill, and her son Herbert, who was a stockbroker, lived here until 1910 is this latest census, and this was bought by PEA before 2002. 31 Elliot Street in the Blake House, circa 1855. This house with stable was owned and likely built by carpenter Dearborn Blake. The lot was sold by Miranda Elliot to Edmund Elliot in 1846, and the Blakes subsequently bought it. The family moved from Kensington, and Dearborn Blake, in partnership with Josiah Sanborn, built the two Kensington meeting houses. The house was sold in 1915. Thomas and Mary Smith were the owners in the 1920s. He was an Irish immigrant and prosperous businessman and shoe store owner, and he built the Smith Block on Water Street. And which building is that? I get them all confused.
Down toward, that's what used to be
Jim.
Woolworths.
Oh.
Oh.
Yeah.
He served as postmaster. And in the early 2000s, it was the home of Principal Thomas Hassan and his wife, Senator Maggie Hassan. Is that still the principal's house? That's what I thought.
The pattern is still bullet glass.
That's right. I think that's in the description. 3 Grove Street, the Hall Thompson House, built in the 1880s. It's the first house on Grove Street it's the first house on Grove Street.
3?
3 Grove Street. This house was shown in the bird's eye map, which is 1884, and these bird's eye maps, there's 2 of them, 1884 and 1896. You can download a digital image from the Library of Congress. Very nice high resolution, and I've got a print of each one in my house because they're really fascinating to see. You could probably find your house on them. Let's see. So this was built in what did I say it was built? 1880s, and was occupied by the same family up until the 1960s. 5 Grove Street, the Gordon House, circa 1890. This house was built between 1884 and 1892. Mary and Lucy Gordon were the owners. They previously had lived with their mother elsewhere in town and worked as teachers. Lucy worked as a nurse in her later years, and she died in 1935. This was then the home of Clifford and Frances Grunwald for many years, and he worked at the drugstore downtown. 6 Grove Street, the Gordon Morrill House, 1851. It's the oldest house on Grove Street. Blacksmith Calvin Gordon bought that lot from Milton Elliot in December 1850. A cellar was under construction, and in 1857 the house was sold in the land and buildings to Anne Morrill. I don't know why it tells us about the cellar, but it's substantial, I guess. Mary Ann Morrill was a widow with 2 daughters. They took in students and lived there until the early 20th century. Later, it was owned by the hardware store owner John Kimball, and his family moved from Grove Court and were longtime owners. 7 Grove Street, the Chase Ross House, circa 1890. This house was built between 1884 and 1892. In the early 20th century, Mary Chase lived here with her daughter Edna and son-in-law Howard Ross, who was a teacher at PEA. going to Alewife Court.
Did they list the
I think I'm-
architects or the builders for each house? Is that part of the survey?
Who built them, you mean, the architects? And-
Yeah, because I mean,
That would be nice, but no, that wasn't,
it's interesting to see the architectural detail in all of them. And
there are descriptions for each house, and like I said, I'm not doing that for each house just because they become kind of repetitive. All these houses being built around the same period.
I was just curious if it's part, if I go online, you can read it.
The whole thing.
Yeah, but it still doesn't tell you who the architect was, or,
They mostly did not have architects.
yeah.
A builder built on his own.
Right, because there's a lot of woodwork, for example, that's quite,
Yeah.
That was the style back then, the Italianate, yeah.
You're thinking of those little curlicues that go around the eaves?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the
yes.
scrolls, the
That
brackets,
was
and,
very in those days.
They also had, it'd be interesting, I wonder if there's information about, because there were traveling porch salesmen who traveled around New England and sold porches. And so a lot of porches came later.
yeah,
Interesting.
that is in the, not that particular aspect of it, but in the descriptions of each house architecturally, there are indications of porches being added on, so, you know, it may very well have been somebody traveling through Exeter saying you need to shade in your living room or something like that.
Because I'm just looking at 11 Grove Street and thinking,
Yeah, that,
I bet that whole thing around the front and side was added at some point.
And you also could get books that would show, here's a day, this is the Italian villa style, and they do this. Or this is the Victorian house style, and you do this.
yeah, there were several, it was not quite a Sears catalog of houses, it was more McCall's pattern kind of,
Yeah,
Book of
pattern
houses.
book, that's what they called them.
yeah, they're pattern books. And I know that my house up on High Street was that kind of thing. It was built from a kind of in a spec way, but not, it wasn't a real estate investment that was made just to be sold. So that's what a lot of these are. They could have been from a pattern book, but I don't know. They're pretty unique, I think, and I think as the personally as since the families moved and you know the kids lived next door and moved onto Court Street, that they were more original than they were the pattern book type
Now,
of
you
building.
see the lower right one there? That's a good straight, almost a federal block, but he has those bay windows on the end.
Bay windows were a great additive during the 1850s. You can see a lot of them throughout town where the foundation is a little bit different than the foundation of the rest of the house. Yeah, it was a fancy change to make your house look either older or more stylish. Kind of like the Lad Gilman house was brick and then covered in clapboards, and that was because brick had gone out of style and clapboards came back into style.
So on 15 Grove Street, it did say that there was a two-story porch extension was added to the side elevation. Didn't say when.
Yeah, it doesn't say when.
But if you want to read about 11, I have that here, Grove Street. It doesn't talk about an addition for the porch.
That's right.
Okay.
I was just kind of curious.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. Yeah.
No, it's hard to find that kind of information about who designed it and actually who built it. I mean, it tells you the owner built it, but you know the carpenter may have been the guy across town.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's even hard to tell if it's the house that's on the deed because it just says land and buildings, you know, in 1848. But the styles and the things like the brackets, the wooden brackets, and the pediments over some windows are the things that tell you the period of the building. And so who did I leave off on? 15 Grove Street. Which ones are you showing here?
12, 13, 14, 15.
Okay. Yeah, 15 Grove Street. That's the end of Grove Street. And now we're going to Alewife Court. Sorry, we had to change the name. It's the Sleeper Kruger house from 1879. It was, are you there? No, we're on to Alewife. Am I not in 7? Yeah, it's from the.
Look at that.
Let's see. This was built by Madison Sleeper, who was a hack driver, taxi driver at the time. And with his wife and children, a mother-in-law, and a female boarder. From 1903 to the 40s, this was the Kruger house. Adolf Kruger immigrated from Germany and worked in the Exeter cotton mill. The family took in lodgers, and his adult daughter and son lived there. And the original address was 9 Grove Court, so changed front doors. 8 Alewife Court, the Quimby Kimball house from 1870. It was originally owned by Daniel Sanborn with his adjacent house on Grove Street. The house was then owned by David Quimby, a jeweler and watchmaker who lived at 19 Elliot Street. His family owned the rental for over 30 years, beginning in 1889, and the old address was 5 Grove Court. Okay. Let's go to 10 Alewife Court, the Bennett House, 1958. Doesn't say much about it because it's modern, 1958. There was a house on this lot from the mid-20th century. I think they were dividing up lots back then. Violet Bennett lived here for many years, and then the lot 2 was subdivided from the former greenhouse property and sold by the Hilliard family. Some of these newer houses we don't have a lot of information on because they haven't been around that long. 11 Alewife Court is a rental. It was Alewife Court. It was originally 7 Grove Court for all you folks that had to change your address. Sorry. This house was built after 1884 by John York of Kensington. George Hilliard bought it and occupied by his greenhouse. And I flipped my page. There. This sentence isn't complete. Oh, it was occupied by Hilliard's greenhouse fireman who kept the coal boilers going, and it was rental property for many years. 13 Alewife Court, the Chute House, 1952. This was subdivided from 86 Front Street and was sold to Henry and Joyce Chute. Not the Henry of the book writing fame, but somewhere down the line. And they lived there till the early 60s. We got 3 Hilliard Circle. This is the bachelor's house from 1952. It's a simple ranch style house with a garage. And it was owned parcel, half acre, again divided off from a neighboring property. Purchased in the 1952, and they owned the local stationery store downtown, which I remember very well. And they lived, and they previously had lived at 21 Elliot Street. 4 Hilliard Circle, the Swinnerton House, 1956, another ranch-style home. Don't have any information except for that it was the home of the retired investment banker Chester Swinnerton. 6 Hilliard Circle, the Sari House, it's Sari with 2 A's. Is the home of Edwina and Eleanor Sari, who moved to Exeter from Massachusetts Edwin, yeah. He worked for an insurance company. After we get through the, when did the Exeter Hampton census or directory stop, in the 60s?
Yeah, 72.
Yeah. After we get later in time in Exeter, we don't have we used to have records of each house and who was living in them. So you could look in, I have a few, the Historical Society has quite a few, yeah. So you could see who was living with them, so that's why we know most of these, the history of who was living in the buildings, as you go look at the,
Yeah, it would say who the
Yes.
John.
no, I'm trying to figure
Yes.
the book, but it would have it by street, and street number, and then there would be another list by the
Name.
owner, so you could cross-reference
Yeah.
the address and who was living there. So, where do they leave off, at 6?
I've got it.
I think at 7? Do I leave off at 7?
City directory,
Yeah, thank you, that's good.
city directories.
Swinnerton House, okay, 6, house. 7 Hilliard Circle, the Taylor House. And it was owned by Robert and Charlotte Taylor. It doesn't mention that she was a teacher for a long, long time. I had Charlotte Taylor as my home ec teacher, I believe.
Back when they had home ec.
Yeah. Now we go to Marston Street. And 2 Marston Street was the Weston House, built around 1890. It's the first house on Marston Street. It was purchased land on the proposed new street from the Gilman family, who owned half of that side of town. George Weston, the Rockingham County Sheriff and Registry of Deeds, according to the census, lived there. And then Percy Chadwick, the history teacher at PEA, owned the house before building 4 Marston Street. And that's about that. 4 Marston Street, the Chadwick House. And all I have up for that is, it was the home of Percy Chadwick and his wife Lily and their daughters, as well as his servant. That's all we know about who owned that one. 69 Court Street, the Second Parish Parsonage. Edmund James was carpenter and joiner, purchased the lot and built the house that he and his wife and sons occupied for a dozen years, and then he sold it in 1965 to be a parsonage for the Second Congregational Church. The adjacent lot was added to the property, and it became quite a large lot. A series of clergymen and their families lived here, along with one. The house was sold by the Second Congregational Parish and was subsequently owned by Walter and Elizabeth Peddle, who were the owners for many years. And he was a retired electrical engineer, but also very active in the history of the town of Exeter. He documented all the old cemeteries, and we have 22 of them, around town, and not just, he documented them, like where the stones were and who's the markers were for. And his daughter, Martha, lived there forever, until just recently, until the last few years, yeah. Okay, let's go to 70 Court Street. That's nice. Yes. 70 Court Street, the Spalding McKee House. The first owner of this house was Lucille Spalding, and she was the wife of Holland Spalding, an electrical engineer from Boston. They put the parcel in her name and mortgaged it for $3,000. So the value has gone up. And they only lived there briefly. And then they moved to Nashua and then Brookline, Mass. The house was bought by the McKees. He had a clothing store downtown, and then Everett and Bessie Lamson were residents, and he was a salesman and insurance agent. 71 to 73 Court Street, the Gooch House. This house was owned by the Gooch family for many years. Walter Gooch was a carriage maker and had a wheelwright shop. The family lived on the upper end of Court Street. He purchased the lot of 4 and 5 Elliot subdivision and 12 acres of church land on the south side of Court Street, and it was known as the Little River Lot. The family moved here finally, and he had a shop on the church land across the road. William and Frances Gooch had 5 children, and in the 1870s, the whole family moved to 83 Court Street, and his brothers Charles and George Gooch, who were carpenters, each acquired half the house. The house was likely remodeled between 1884 and 1896 as a duplex, and it was a rental for many years. In 1910, George and Emma Kimball lived here, and before purchasing 83 Court Street. The other unit was rented out to a druggist. So multifamily use dates from the late 20th century. Okay, 74 Court Street, the Follinsby rental, 1890. This was the first Congregational Society land. The house was built as a rental property by William Follinsby of the bank, and he lived on High Street. He bought the land from the church, and in 1900 it was rented to real estate dealer Warren Locke. He and his family took in female lodgers who were teachers. In the mid-20th century, the owner was insurance agent James Rathman. 75 to 77 Court Street, the Hervey Sewell House, around 1800 to 1867. Let's see. The house originally stood on the corner of Elm and Maple Streets. It was moved for the construction of the Unitarian Church. The new owner was Eliza Hervey. She and her late husband had kept a confectionery shop in town, and she lived there with her son Louis, who was a carpenter and kept a boarding house for students and others. The house has been apartments since the mid-20th century. 27 Court Street, the Walker House, circa 1890. The single-family house with a rental property owned by Follinsby, previously mentioned. Is that our last one?
27
27.
Court Street.
Yeah. That's photo 51.
Okay. All right, yep. That's photo.
That's where we-
76 Court Street.
Yes, you are
Okay.
correct. You are correct, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm jumping ahead. This single-family house was a rental property owned by Follinsby until he sold it in 1894 to Mrs. Noah Walker. And she lived here with her daughter and son-in-law, bank clerk, and their family, as well as 2 lodgers. The owners in 1950 were Patrick and Dorothy Markey, and he was in auto sales, and PEA has owned the house since 2001. 79 to 81 Court Street, condominiums, circa 2005. That kind of speaks for itself. 80 Court Street in the Fuller House in 1885. This is the home of Arthur and Ellen Fuller. He was a lawyer in Cambridge, and that's a commute in the 1870s. They had seven children and employed a housekeeper, and they lived here until the 1930s, and PEA acquired the property in 2017. 83 Court Street, the Gooch Kimball House. Photo 64. This was Lot 8 of Miranda Elliott's subdivision on Court Street. The house was built for William L. and Frances Gooch, who moved their family from 71 to 73 Court Street. And Is that the end? Yeah. That is the end of the history of the area that we did. Each one of these houses, I can go through the architectural styles. I'll give you an example of what kind of things that they talk about. And I'm going to start like early on. Which one is your house? The
69.
I'll show you. I'll tell you what they. There you go. So this is the kind of architectural description that you'll get for each of your houses on the in the survey area. 69 Court Street, the second parish. Is that what you said? 69 Court Street. Second parish parsonage from 1854. The first privately owned house on Court Street beyond the PEA boundary. It's a large transitional Greek revival Italianate style. And so when it says transitional, it started out as Greek revival and then added on perhaps the brackets and some of the other trim that made it look more Italianate. It's 2.5 stories, gable front, 4x3 bays with a side entrance. The pedimented gable end with frieze and molded cornice, and the peaked window lintels are Greek revival. The foundation is granite and the walls are clapboards. The windows are 6/6 replacement sash flanked by wooden shutters. The porch was chamfered posts and sawn railings, and the 2-story bay window was added on a brick foundation. An L connects the large 2.5-story carriage barn with a modern garage, or modern garage doors. The parcel is 0.78 acres, which is a double lot currently. And there's an open yard on the northeast side of the lot, and the front yard is defined by a hedge. So that's the kind of detail that I have for each of these houses that aren't attributed to the historic persons that live there. And so if you're interested in learning that kind of thing, we also have a description before we start talking about each house of what those different styles mean. Jeanette may be able to help you.
With what?
No, not with which one, but what Italianate means and. Yeah, it's the kind of knowledge that after you don't use it's like a foreign language. If you don't use it for a while, it just drops off. But the examples of styles we've seen here, and I think Pam mentioned it, the styles of the Victorian era, or most of it is from the Victorian era. But houses from the 1840s to 1880s were pretty much a Greek revival and Italianate style. It does mention what the characteristics are, the molded cornices, the boards and frieze bands, eave returns, pedimental ends, which is that you open the front door is under the pointed end, as opposed to coming in on a side street or having the gable ends go on the other side with your front door in the middle. Nearly a third of the houses in the area reflect the Italianate style, which is widely popular. The typical form is a gable side with a center entry, or a gable front with a side hall. And most high-style Italianate homes, like 3 Pine Street and others around the corner in Front Street, have hip roofs. In this neighborhood, that's where the entrance is on the front of with the gable ends on the front of the hip. Scroll brackets, hooded windows, and some of the windows have little peaked trims on them, or if they're arched or semi-arched trim. I'm sorry, I'm not feeling very.
You've been doing a marathon.
Well, this is not at all going as smoothly as when I practiced. So I would encourage you all to look at things. These are listed, the styles are listed by the dates that they were most popular, like the Greek Revival, and I don't think there's any Roman here. Greek Revival takes kind of forms where you'll see the trim on the buildings kind of look like columns. It's not necessarily that there is a column, but it is supposed to look like the Acropolis or something like that. That house at 3 Pine Street, the Burley Shoot House, has the corner pieces are not just straight trim. They look like blocks of granite or logs. So that makes it a little kind of show off in that you're not really a granite house, you're not really a wood house, you're showing up on your neighbors that you've grown up from something more basic. I'm trying to think of another good one. So houses moved, families moved just within the neighborhood. I find that kind of fascinating because where I live on the other side of town, people didn't keep it in family. It wasn't such a neighborhood as this nice area is, and you can tell that from the families that spread out next to each other, and then a couple generations lived there, and then they moved across, the other side of the area and stayed in that nice defined neighborhood. So it was
interesting to see there were so many houses that going up in the 70s, 1870s.
Yeah.
And my gosh, it must have been a real
Yeah, that's
lot of activity,
Yeah, especially after the greenhouses were gone and all that
Yeah,
space opened up,
exactly.
and the Elliots had that big parcel of land. What's interesting is that there isn't a plan that shows a planned development. It was just, hey, I want a piece of property, will you sell me half an acre? I know I found a map of Washington Street that was laid out before it was built, and it was quarter acre lot, quarter acre lot, quarter acre lot. So this is, everybody could, buy as much property as they wanted to fit their needs. Some bought the next property over to, make it wider or to build for their family. And so these kind of things are what we do as the Heritage Commission. And this is the first time we've actually presented one of these surveys, partly because we didn't have any, how shall I put it, assistance from town employees. We didn't have enough people to staff the committee, so it was all left on our volunteers, and some of us don't have some of the capabilities that we really wanted to have to make these kind of presentations. So we'll be presenting the other ones that we've already done, and we're going to pursue more. The state has a desire or master plan to have surveys of all the towns, historical surveys of all the towns in the state. So I put in my first application for grant was to survey Exeter.
The whole of Exeter.
Yeah, the whole of Exeter, and they just like, what? So in the end, we got just doing the beginning of the town, and that's where the mapping survey comes in to show how it grew, and we've tried to prioritize the areas so we can pass through time in a consecutive kind of way. Didn't quite work out that way because different members of the Heritage Commission would say, hey, let's do that area because I like it. and like this one, wasn't really intended to be at this time, but it's so fascinating that it was all built in such a short period of time, the 1840s to 1880s, and the people that lived there and the occupations that were there. I didn't know there were greenhouses there until this was done.
I loved it.
Yeah,
I
it's
still
like,
dig up glass.
do you?
Do you?
And I'm on Court Street.
Wow.
And whenever I'm out planting.
You are
and
kidding.
I said something to one of my friends who lives in Hilliard Court, and he said, oh, that's from all the old greenhouses.
Really?
And so every time I dig something up, I wear gloves.
Yeah, wear gloves.
And because he said at his house, it actually will churn up after rainstorms. He goes out and he'll
Because
find
glass
pieces of
rises
glass
to the
because
surface.
Well, if you think, I think it was pretty extensive,
It-
those greenhouses.
Yes.
It was really famous.
It was huge.
And so in the hurricane of 38, there must have just been glass everywhere.
Now, with all
Oh,
those elm trees going up and down the street, they all fell over. I'm not surprised that the greenhouses went, plus they were not solidly built as a house.
Right.
But we didn't lose any houses in the hurricane of 38, so they were well built.
That's interesting.
So,
Does anybody
Seems
know?
like there were some on Grove at
Mhm.
first, and my house,
Yeah.
my backyard abuts.
They went- they
is
went from
close
Court
to
Street.
Grove Street,
Yeah.
so there must have been a greenhouse somewhere near there.
Well, in Hurricane Rouge.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
so they're,
Thank you.
Does anybody want a page of their house? Do you want a page of your house?
Sure.
Okay, which one,
25 Elliot.
okay,
my packet's all messed up now. so-
okay, I know, I bet. I'll get it.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, now you guys have to have a neighborhood,
Yeah, the name.
now you have to have a neighborhood block party.
We had one for so many years,
Did
and it's just so much work.
I could never go, because it was always on Labor Day weekend, and my mom's birthday was September 3rd.
Thank you for tuning in to
25